So this is a review for A Wild Hare, released in 1940. It's the 295th in the series, and it's directed by Tex Avery. You can find this beautiful restoration on the Looney Tunes Platinum Collection Volume 2 DVD and Blu-ray set, and on the Bugs Bunny 80th Blu-ray set. It did make its way also onto the Essential Bugs Bunny DVD set beforehand, similar to how Daffy Duck's first appearance appeared in the Essential Daffy Duck that was released roughly around that time. It is under copyright. You won't find it here on YouTube unless Warner Brothers themselves choose to upload it on their own channel, and I don't see why they wouldn't, given that this is a historical cartoon. In case you haven't seen this one, it's a classic. It's history being made, although they certainly wouldn't have known it at the time. It's just another day in the office for him. But you have Elmer going out for a hunt, and he encounters a certain rabbit who ends up screwing with him for the rest of the short. There's really not much to it in terms of story, and chances are you've seen this, or you can probably guess exactly what happens because someone might have described this short to you, because this short has left such a massive mark on pop culture history. It just cannot be understated, and will certainly go through that. So, given that this is a Milestone short, I'm going to have a few guests on this one. I've got my good friends Austin Kelly, Luke Perkins, Eli Kopperman, Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor, and Matt Hunter. So all budding historians and massive fans of animation, of course. Manny Cruz also being a musician, he'll touch upon the music in this one, so it's going to be one big party here. Before I get into this review and go through some of the trivia, my good friend Austin Kelly, he sent me a recording a while back that I used for the original commentary that I had to take down, but I'm starting fresh for this video. And he states perfectly why this short is so important, and he says it better than I could. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to play this part in full, and then I'll go through some of the other trivia. So take it away, Austin.
Hi, I'm Austin Kelly. You know, there are few times in history where everything comes together at the perfect time, when everyone's at the peak of their powers, and a collaborative effort is able to turn something into something wonderful that no one ever expected. And everyone is doing much better than they ever have, and they're all coming together at the same time to really reach perfection. And I think A Wild Hare is one of those times. Some people out there might think I'm joking, but I am dead serious. If you really think about it and break down each one of the staff members that worked on this cartoon, you're going to notice that they were all, basically with the exception of Tex Avery, at the peak of their powers and doing work and putting out work just as well as they ever could. The cartoon itself might be weak to some people, I don't know who that would be, but the impact that it made on America and the world and cartoon history overall is undeniable. And I think that alone makes A Wild Hare the most important and noteworthy cartoon, and maybe even short film, of all time. I said earlier that all the people working on this cartoon were basically at their peak in their careers, and they were doing just as well as they ever could. And I think that another thing that contributed to the success of this cartoon was the fact that it came out at the perfect time. And this was right after the Depression and right before World War II. If Bugs Bunny came out during World War II, he would have taken probably a little while to get popular. It wouldn't be for at least a couple of years until Bugs Bunny was really a household name. And by the time those years were up, World War II would have been over, and America would not have needed any joy or cheers to help them get through this or that uncertain time. But since A Wild Hare came out in 1940, Bugs was able to build up popularity in the, 15, 16, 17 months leading up from the time that A Wild Hare came out, the time that Pearl Harbor got bombed, and America was forced into the war. I'd also like to note that 1940 overall seems to be the breakthrough year for a lot of studios and for a lot of people in the cartoon industry. Obviously, Bugs Bunny comes out. Tom and Jerry come out in their first cartoon at MGM, and same thing with Woody Woodpecker. He comes out with his first cartoon for the first time. Obviously, all these characters were important, but Woody Woodpecker was more or less a typical screwball character of the time, or at least in 1940. And Tom and Jerry was just another cat and mouse duo who wouldn't really gain any originality or anything that set their cat and mouse cartoons apart from the rest for at least a few more years. But what's so special about Bugs is that right away in A Wild Hare, he's the character that he's going to be and that he will be for the next 8 decades. And in the end, I think that's why Bugs was so popular, why he was so special, and why he will remain and why he always has been the greatest character in the history of film. It's kind of funny. Tex was known as kind of a perfectionist, and he analyzed his films frame by frame after they were completed to make sure that there was nothing that he wasn't against. And he looked back on A Wild Hare later on in his life, and he actually said he didn't like it very much. He said he thought the gags were dull and there was something really special about it, and he had no idea why it went over so well. So it's kind of funny that even after creating the greatest character of all time, Tex is still dissatisfied and he's not proud of his own work. But you know what? No matter what Tex says, if you can create a character that's popular as it was when it first came out 8 decades later, you've got a winner on your hands. The animation overall in this cartoon isn't the best that the Warner Studio would turn out, but some of the select scenes in this cartoon definitely do rank high among some of the greatest scenes of all time. You know what I'm talking about. Bob McKimson's death scene, Rod Scribner's scene of Bugs shaking his ass in front of Elmer, Virgil Ross's scene of Bugs screaming into Elmer's ear, and even Paul Smith's cruder stuff, which ironically includes probably the most iconic scene of all time, Bugs knocking on Elmer's head and saying, "What's up, Doc?" for the first time. Is the animation in this cartoon the best that ever came out of any cartoon ever? No. But is it the most iconic and most important cartoon ever released? Yes, absolutely. And to that, Tex Avery, I salute you.
So with the other guests, they'll be intersped all throughout this review in different ways, just to mix things up, because I want this to be a proper celebration for this very obscure short. Okay, I'm kidding. Of course not obscure, but maybe for the current generation. Hopefully there'll be a whole new generation discovering this short, because even if you don't know who Bugs Bunny is, which would be very surprising given that he's one of the most prominent cartoon characters of all time, second maybe only to Mickey Mouse, right? But they may not have actually seen this short, so hopefully this review will get people to go out there and track down this short and give it a watch and have a good laugh. Because even if the character Bugs Bunny didn't take off, I maintain this is a solid short, full stop. It's funny. And it's Tex Avery in peak form, at least at Warner Brothers. He would go even further at MGM, but as for 1940 Tex Avery, this is definitely one of his best moments regardless. But I'll be weaving in my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor, all throughout this review, so let's bring him on board to introduce himself. So take it away, Manny.
Hi everyone, this is Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time with music trivia for you today. Bum! For the 1940 Merry Melody cartoon, A Wild Hare, directed by Tex Avery, with musical direction by Carl W. Stalling. So it's great to come on here to do a quick edition of Manny's Music Time to talk about this monumental cartoon, considered by many to be the first official Bugs Bunny cartoon, even though we all know that for those of us that do the research, that Bugs Bunny has existed for a few years prior, as early back as 1938 with the cartoon Porky's Hare Hunt by Ben Hardaway. And this is the hill that I'm willing to die on. His name is not Happy Hare, or Happy Rabbit, excuse me. That character is, you could call him the prototype of Bugs Bunny or Proto-Bugs. Me personally, the character that appeared in Porky's Hare Hunt and Presto Chango, the White Rabbit, I like to call him the Hardaway Hare or Hardaway Hare, even though that's not an official term. Just like Happy Rabbit is not an official term. You could clearly see that I'm getting triggered by this, but as early as 1939, we had evidence that the character, this crazy, screwy rabbit that Chuck Jones and Ben Hardaway and Cal Dalton were working with, was called Bugs' Bunny, or Bugs Bunny. He was considered an incidental character at the time, and then once A Wild Hare came out in July of 1940, his popularity would skyrocket, and now here we are 85 years later talking about arguably the greatest cartoon character ever created. And clearly I'm talking about Elmer Fudd.
And here is Matt Hunter putting things further into context in regards to the origin of Bugs Bunny and his general thoughts on this short. So take it away, Matt.
Of course, I don't have to tell you that this is one of the most significant cartoon shorts ever made. And not only just because it's the first official Bugs Bunny, but I think it was Tex Avery's most significant contribution to the Warner cartoon legacy. And that's saying a lot considering all he did in the 5 years he was at the studio. Avery didn't pull something out of a void here. As you're talking about, the elements were all there. He was just the master chef who found the perfect combination of ingredients. Ben, Bugs, Hardaway, Hardaway, who's the character's namesake, he essentially had the right idea, but he made the rabbit a little too wacky, and the hunter was a little bit too unpleasant. Chuck Jones made a good call by pairing the rabbit with Elmer Fudd, but he calmed him down a little too much, and that cartoon was Elmer's Candid Camera, defined Elmer Fudd, but made the rabbit character a little bit too slow. So Avery decided that the Hardaway-Jones Hare was too goofy, and he had the artist Bob Givens redesign him to make him taller and more angular, and he had Mel Blanc come up with a new voice. And he explained that this character was a tough little stinker, as Blanc said, as opposed to the hyperactive lunatic. And so Blanc decided there was nobody tougher than a New Yorker, and he settled on a combination of Brooklyn and the Bronx and settled on that. Of course, the immortal line, "What's up, Doc?" And that sealed the deal. And then, of course, the carrot was inspired by a scene in a Clark Gable movie where Clark Gable kind of sarcastically chewed on a carrot. The previous rabbit character had chewed on celery, mighty fine nerve tonic. And at one point, he casually chomps on an apple in Elmer's Candid Camera. But it's the carrot here that seals the deal on that. And, of course, wabbits, wav, cowits, was Arthur Q. Bryant's contribution. So it was really just all these elements coming together, and you see it in this cartoon, and it sets the template for everything that would go forward, and we can thank Tex Avery and those other artists for that.
So trivia-wise, I'll point out things as we go along, but there's two things I just want to mention before we do that. The impact of this short is undeniable, but after the short was released and proved to be very popular, they actually released a comic book version of this short, which is kind of unusual because the comic books usually would do their own thing, and they would even feature characters that are barely even in the shorts themselves. And on the radio, on the Al Pierce show, you had Arthur Q. Bryan and Mel Blanc doing a version of Wild Hare, and then there was an interview with Leon Schlesinger afterwards. So this short definitely proved itself to be very popular. And the other bit of trivia I wanted to mention is that this was actually nominated for an Academy Award. It did end up losing to Harmon and Ising's MGM short, The Milky Way, which in itself, the short is actually a nice short. It's not bad. It's one of those things where, okay, in hindsight, you look at it and go, yeah, Wild Hare probably should have won, but at the end of the day, the voters wouldn't have known the cultural impact. They probably didn't really even care about these animated shorts anyway in regards to voting. They'd be more concerned with the live action stuff, so maybe they just saw the Milky Way and thought, yeah, this is a cute cartoon and voted for that. I don't know. Does that make Milky Way a bad short? No. But there is a little bit of irony to it because you have Wild Hare, it introduces bugs, big pop culture sensation, but the short that wins the Academy Award that year for Best Animated Short, Harmon and Ising, who actually started doing the Warner Brothers animation all the way in 1930. So there's that. I'm going to go through the short from start to finish, giving my observations all throughout, and also add some animation breakdown courtesy of Devin Baxter and Thad Komorowski, and that comes from a wonderful Tex Avery blog that has actually covered every single Warner Brothers Tex Avery short. And it's a great resource, and I highly recommend you guys take a look at that as he goes into even more detail than what these reviews I do on YouTube allow for, but given that it's such a special short, I'll include that information as well. So first up, looking at that title card, it is a little bit on the weirder side because when you look at it really closely, it kind of looks like the forest is on fire and a rabbit is looking on. Maybe that has a deeper meaning that I'm not aware of. But no, it's fine for what it is. And as with anything, I'm glad that the original titles are available for this short. And in case this is your first review and you weren't aware, at this point in time, they only credited one person per part. So you had, of course, Fred Avery, aka Tex Avery supervision, story by Rich Hogan, animation by Virgil Ross. But especially with Virgil Ross, he was certainly not the only animator here. You had Bob McKimson amongst others, and I will go through that very shortly, and musical direction by Carl Starling. So the credits would typically be on one page around this time before they ended up changing later on, and later on even Mel Blanc would get credit as well.
As we know, this cartoon was nominated for the Academy Award in 1940, and I'm recording this a few days after the Academy Awards. I was actually in Mexico. One of my closest friends got married. It was the day after the wedding. They had this big Academy Awards ceremony outdoors in the resort I was in Mexico. And I saw the Best Animated Short and Best Animated Film segments, but I wasn't paying too much attention because they had delicious food in front of me and I cared about that. It was kind of like Bugs with this carrot. See, I did a segue, and let's segue to the musical cues, shall we? So the cartoon starts off with I'm Just Wild About Harry, with music by UB Blake and the words by Noble Sissel. Now, I spoken in previous Manny's Music Time about UB Blake that I wanted to go more in depth about him. I'm going to put a pin in that, and I want to save that for when I get to the commentary for Yankee Doodle Daffy, because in that cartoon, a staple of my childhood because it was on a public domain tape, Daffy Duck sings pretty much a full verse of this song with the words. In this cartoon, obviously, you only hear the instrumental version of it. Fortunately, we're able to hear it now because this cartoon was reissued in the Blue Ribbon program, and for many years we thought that we lost the opening titles, and the cartoon was retitled as The Wild Hare. But fortunately, we have the opening titles, and we could hear Stallings' arrangement of I'm Just Wild About Harry. And what's neat that I didn't know until a few hours ago is that this is the first Warner Brothers short to feature I'm Just Wild About Harry. And it would be used in other Warner Brothers shorts, as I said, Yankee Doodle Daffy. There's a great rendition of it by Mama Bear, sung by B. Benaderet, in the cartoon A Bear for Punishment, where she sings this song with altered lyrics for the Father's Day celebration at the end of the cartoon. So yeah, it's great to talk about this particular song. I love it. And this song was written in 1921, and it was originally featured in a Broadway show called Shuffle Along. And again, for UB Blake and Noble Sissel, I want to put a pin in them. I want to talk a little bit more about them another time. So let's move on.
So we open up with the now very classic catchphrase that just about everyone knows, which is, of course, be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting wabbits.
And you got to wonder what audiences would have thought of that at the time. And keep in mind that these were made for audiences in the cinema or the theater, as I found out Americans would call it. But, you know, he's breaking the fourth wall. He's talking to the audience. And Arthur Q. Bryan's voice is just perfect for Elmer. It's hard to imagine any other voice actor taking on such a role. I mean, obviously now you got replacements for Arthur Q. Bryan since he's long passed away. But at the time, they could have picked anyone. They could have had maybe Mel Blanc do a variation on a voice or something. But no, Avery has used Arthur Q. Bryan here. And it's not the first time Arthur Q. Bryan has voiced Elmer. He definitely did the voice in Elmer's Candid Camera. And Tex even used Arthur Q. Bryan before. In fact, I believe this is Arthur Q. Bryan's first voice role in a Warner Brothers short, Dangerous Dan McPhoo.
Hello, everybody.
So Tex Avery may have kept that voice in the back of his mind and chose to use it here for Elmer. I don't know. It's one of those things that's lost to time, but regardless, perfect voice for Elmer. But there was this evolution between the older Egghead character and then an Elmer Fudd character, and that whole thing will take me a very long time to go through, but all we know is that this is just about the Elmer Fudd that we all know today. He would have variations throughout the years, like the so-called Fat Elmer that comes into play for a few Bob Clampett shorts. But I love this beautiful opening scene where it gets you into kind of a false sense of security, where it looks as though, at least for a brief moment, to be some sort of a Disney-esque type thing. Avery did a similar thing in A Bear's Tale, where the backgrounds look very similar to this, but it does the job. It even has like a multi-plane camera type effect in the beginning, but once everything gets set up, Avery doesn't really do that, but it's kind of like getting into a false sense of security. But this intro, even though I've seen this cartoon so many times, the vocal delivery just kills me here. He goes, a wabbit hole. Wabbits love carrots.
Oh boy, wabbit Twex. A wabbit hole. Wabbits love carrots.
Just the delivery, so simplistic and ridiculous. In terms of animation ID, they believe that Virgil Ross was the animator for the opening scene. There's another animator for Elmer Fudd's close-up, and then once we see that beautiful little pantomime of Bugs Bunny's hand, where he notices that there's a carrot there in that beautiful scene, it appears to be Bob McKimson. So you got the animation of the hand itself basically acting like a dog, and I just love how McKimson makes all of that work. It's just fantastic. It starts off very slow, and then whoosh, we get that grab of that carrot. So Alma then approaches with his shotgun, and in another wonderful scene of pantomime, again by Bob McKimson, just the fact that the hand, there's just so much acting in that one arm, and of course the hand itself, how the hand goes to check to see if there's another carrot, realizes that there's a gun there, and then even puts the carrot back. But then in another take, whoosh, he just steals the carrot again. And to top it all off, we've got the wonderful song cue playing in that particular bit as well. Now, Devin Baxter notes that the next bit appears to be Paul Smith, and we've got that wonderful moment of the shotgun going up, down, and sure enough, the gun is turned into a bow. You know, we haven't even seen the bunny yet, and all we're seeing is this frustrated Alma dealing with essentially an unseen force, except for the hand that he saw earlier, and it's a great way to show off that this character is no ordinary character. He's a bit of a smartass. Can you just imagine audiences watching this and going, what is going on? What kind of a character would do this to this hunter who's just going about hunting a rabbit?
We then have the song While Strolling Through the Park One Day by Ed Haley, and that song is from the year 1884, so it was already an oldie by the time the 40s came along. Now, this is the song you hear in this beautiful opening when Elmer is looking for the wabbit, and he's pointing his shotgun at the wabbit hole, and Bugs' hand comes out, and it starts acting like a human being, and he starts literally walking with his hands, and it's just beautifully animated and just beautifully timed with the music. I like the arrangement that Carl Stalling did, and obviously the orchestrations, uncredited by the great Milt Franklin. And I can only imagine what the audience was thinking during this time, where it's like you see the hunter, he's pointing the shotgun at the wabbit hole, and you don't see the character, you don't see the wabbit itself, and you're just like laughing at how ridiculous this situation is. And, you know, obviously I wasn't alive in 1940 to see this, but I can only imagine the audience response to this.
So Elmer just decides to dig through the hole, and out pops our soon-to-be new Warner Brothers star character, Bugs Bunny. You will notice, though, and this is more for people who are new to Warner Brothers history and who aren't aware, you may notice that he looks kind of different. And for the longest time, the different units would do different variations on what Bugs Bunny looked like as this character evolved, not just in design-wise, but even story-wise, attitude-wise. Sometimes he'll be a little bit more mean-spirited, and some he'll be even more of a goofball. Sometimes he'll be more of a loser than a winner. So they're still going to figure things out. But the design is just about there. I mean, if you put this short next to a later Bugs Bunny short, you still know it's Bugs Bunny, because it's not just the design, it's also the actual attitude as well. So Bugs twirls out from the hole, hops up, lifts up Elmer's hat, knocks on his head, and says the now immortal line. And this is a line that Tex Avery himself used, so they obviously put that in here. We all know what that line is, so we'll let Bugs say it.
What's up, Doc?
But Elmer shushes him, saying there's a wabbit down there, and I'm trying to catch him.
Shh, there's a wabbit down there, and I'm trying to catch him.
And the way Bugs is just laying down, thinking, okay, this guy's an idiot. I'm now going to mess with him in the entire short. And the audience at the time, yeah, they would have caught on pretty quickly. Now we've established what's going to happen. It's going to be this bunny character, who's actually not named Bugs Bunny, by the way, in this one. He's just a bunny character. He's just Bunny, right? He's going to be up against Elmer Fudd for the rest of this short. As to what's going to happen, though, well, that's where the fun part comes in. So when we get to that close-up of Bugs Bunny just in his carrot, all casual-like, knowing that he's going to be dealing with an idiot, that looks as though that's Virgil Ross, according to that article. So Bugs, of course, is, what do you mean, wabbit? And we get a gag that we'll end up seeing numerous times later on, where Elmer is so stupid he doesn't realize that he's actually talking to a rabbit. But hey, that's where all the fun is, right?
What do you mean, wabbit? Wabbits, wabbits. You know, with big, long ears.
So once we see the two characters in frame, we see animator Rod Scribner, and here is not as unhinged as he would be when he works for Clampett, and even a few times for McKimson after that, where he still did some unhinged work, although more tightly controlled. And we get a wonderful scene of Alma describing what a rabbit is to Bugs, and Bugs is literally showing that he is a bunny, and of course, Alma is just so stupid until he finally realizes, you know, I think this is an R-A-B-B-I-T.
Oh, like this? Yeah, and a little white fluffy tail. Like this? Yup. And he hops around and around. Oh, like this? You know, I believe this fella is a R-A-B-B-I-T.
And even winks at the audience, because again, people in the cinema would have been watching this, likely had a great chuckle over that. And now in one of my favorite bits of this short, where Bugs calls over Elmer, looks around and says, confidentially, and just yells in Elmer's ear, I am a wabbit. And that's also Virgil Ross as well.
Pardon me, but you know, you look just like a wabbit. Come here. Listen, Doc. Now, don't spread this around. But, confidentially, I am a wabbit!
What a great way to start things off. So I'm going to take a bit of a pause here. My good friend Luke Perkins is going to give us his thoughts on this short and his own observations. So take it away, Luke.
It was been said that this cartoon was first theatrically released with the Warner Brothers film called Ladies Must Live, back when cartoons were always released with films theatrically before the film would start and was usually welcomed by audiences. Like, whenever you would go to the theater back in the day, you would get a trailer for a movie, a newsreel, a short subject, and at least one cartoon before the movie. So going to the movies was always a big event back in the day. Oh man, what can you say about A Wild Hare? It's definitely one of the most 10 out of 10 cartoons ever made in the history of the golden age of animation. It's like the real true first Bugs Bunny short by Tex Avery. And even though there had definitely been experiments before, this is where the personality really starts to shine, where you know everything about this character just by 3 simple lines in his personality, like, you know, what's up, Doc? And that shot itself of Bugs Bunny going, what's up, Doc? Was animated by Paul Smith, who was in Tex Avery's unit. And he would later go on to be a director and an animator in Walter Lance's studio. So he definitely had quite an impressive history. There's definitely a lot of Bugs Bunny shorts that I love that are on par with A Wild Hare. Like, A Wild Hare, it's amazing from a historical perspective, but there's a bunch of Bugs Bunny shorts that are just perfect in the sense of how they're perfect Bugs Bunny cartoons, because they understand the personality of the character very well. Plus, they're just great shorts on their own, even with Tex Avery completely gone. Bugs Bunny shorts directed by Tex Avery, and I'm not going to bring up all this in Rabbit Stew, okay? I'm just going to say that. One interesting thing I notice about in a lot of the Tex Avery Bugs Bunny shorts is that with the voices like, yeah, what's up, Doc? But with a lot of his earlier shorts, it's like, what's up, Doc? It feels a bit inspired from the Clark Gable type of impersonation, specifically from It Happened One Night. But there is a tiny sliver of James Stewart or Jimmy Stewart if you find it. Because I know that in the Chuck Jones short called Elmer's Pet Rabbit, the Jimmy Stewart impersonation of Bugs Bunny pulls it into a 100. It's like, oh, step here, all this awful food, you know? It's always really interesting to hear what people think about cartoons like back in the day. One fact that was present is the fact that when Bugs Bunny first comes out and says, what's up, Doc? Almost every theater that was in, that literally brought the house down. The audiences loved it because when you're watching a typical cartoon, you usually expect the bunny to scream in terror whenever they see a gun. But it was just Bugs Bunny's cool personality, just very calm, just chomping on a carrot casually and going, what's up, Doc? That just took the audience by surprise, and they loved him for it. It's no wonder that it got nominated for an Oscar, too. 1940 was an impressive year for animation. The debut of Bugs Bunny, the debut of Woody Woodpecker, the debut of Tom and Jerry. You also have these two ambitious Disney films that sadly bombed because of World War II, like Pinocchio and Fantasia, that are all cinematically ambitious. 1940 was a very exciting year for animation. And then with the Academy Awards, A Wild Hare was nominated, Puss Gets the Boot was nominated, and then there's The Milky Way from MGM. No Disney nominations because it was said that Disney took them off because he wanted them to focus on the films. Like the shorts were just kind of there. But what's interesting is how The Milky Way was really the first non-Disney cartoon to break the Disney chain for winning Best Animated Short, and yet that short itself was directed by Rudolph Ising, who actually was a Disney veteran back in the 1920s days in Kansas City, I believe. He worked on the Alice comedies, and Hugh Harman did too. So it's a very interesting connection. In terms of rating, I would definitely rate this as like a 10 out of 10. It's definitely one of the most perfect cartoons in the golden age of animation. Like, I don't watch it a lot, but anytime I watch it, I absolutely love it. It's a very special cartoon. And it's one of my favorite Bugs Bunny cartoons because it's such a strong debut for this character. I love it a lot.
So thank you, Luke. So let's get back into it. So right now we're in another great bit where Bugs is hiding behind a tree but sneaks up behind Alma. And so we see a really funny Guess Who game where, again, Alma's just so stupid. Love him around this period of time. So Bugs is like, guess who? And Fudd just mentions all of these Hollywood actresses. I guess he's very hopeful that one of them might fall in love with him. I don't know. One of which that was originally mentioned was Carole Lombard, but she had passed away when this short was reissued later on, so that line ended up being cut. And you had Rosemary Jane, Olivia de Havilland, and she actually lived a very long life. She was in her hundreds before she eventually passed away only a few years ago, so she definitely lived a long life.
Guess who? Eddie Wilmore? Nope. Well, Carole Lombard? Rosemary Wayne? Nope. Olivia de Havilland? Nope, but you're getting warmer. Guess who? Eddie Wilmore? Nope. Barbara Stanwyck? Rosemary Wayne? Nope. Olivia de Havilland? Nope, but you're getting warmer.
But these were all very popular, very famous actresses that Alma seemed to think that they were somehow in the woods at this time. Makes it even funnier when you actually know who they are. And sure enough, Alma is, say, you wouldn't be that screwy rabbit, would ya?
Say, you wouldn't be that screwy wabbit, would you? Could be.
And that's one of the traits that they would end up using in future Bugs Bunny shorts. And this was something that even Bugs Hardway sort of used in his prototype Bugs Bunny shorts as well. The whole just absolute screwiness of this bunny character. And fun fact, Devin Baxter mentions that whole thing where Bugs ends up kissing Alma. He believes that was used in a short from 1916 by Charlie Chaplin called The Floor Walker. So I guess something old is made new again, since Bugs will end up doing a lot of this stuff in his future shorts. So Bugs ends up going into his hole, and we see this wonderful shot actually. I'd say this is Bugs's humble earlier days where he's in a very small hole, but if you look at later shorts, his usual home in the ground would be absolutely massive, but here it's incredibly tiny. I know, there's no consistency in these things. I just think it's quite amusing that first short, he's got a small hole, but the more famous he becomes, he just has massive homes underground. And when he's in that hole, this bit is animated by Bob McKimson. Of course, Bugs has to smooch Alma again, right? Because why not? Alma's not happy with being kissed, so he decides, you know what? I'm going to set up a trap.
I'll twig that wabbit. I'll set my wabbit trap.
And he does. And, you know, in some shorts, characters might set up traps that end up being these over-elaborate, crazy things. But no, here we just have a small-time hunter making a small-time trap. One which, to be fair, if he was hunting a regular rabbit, could actually work. Although I do find it hilarious that he has to add the sign saying carrots, because again, if it was a regular rabbit doing that, do you think a rabbit could read that? Makes it even funnier. And the fact that he even wrote the words there. It's little things like that that make it even funnier. So Alma whistles, Bugs Bunny pops out in an amazing bit of animation where if you slow-mo that bit, it's actually hilarious seeing Bugs' shocked face when he's like, oh, there's a carrot?
Wabbit, nice fresh carrots.
So we get a beautiful layout shot of Alma rushing towards a tree. We pan over a little bit and then we hear that the trap had been set. And sure enough, Elmer goes in, grabs what he thinks is Bugs, but I guess it's one of Pepper Le Pew's cousins, right? Maybe a distant cousin because of how different he looks, but in any case. And Elmer, being incredibly stupid, of course, he's seeing that the rabbit is right in front of him, doing his soon-to-be iconic pose that would be part of many merchandising and part of a lot of the model sheets whenever they design the character when they're refining down the track, done by Bob McKimson for those particular model sheets.
Fell for my trap, didn't you, Mr. Wabbit? Too smart for you, wasn't I? I finally caught you, didn't I?
This bit kills me every time where Bugs just randomly kisses him on the nose. It's so subtle and yet is so funny that every time I see that bit, it just kills me every time. But sure enough, Elmo realizes, yeah, what did I catch? He turns over and notices that it's a skunk. Now, the skunk says confidentially, well, you know.
Confidentially, you know.
That's a reference to the whole line, confidentially, she stinks. And that comes from, and I've always butchered this name, Misha Auer, and that's from a film called You Can't Take It With You from 1938, where the line is confidentially, she stinks. So, Avery's clearly playing up some pop culture there. Thankfully, you don't even need to know that pop culture reference, and that's the great thing about a lot of these Looney Tunes shorts. A lot of the time, you don't need to know what a lot of the references are, they're just there. They work whether or not you actually know it. But the animation of Alma putting down the skunk as he goes about his merry way it's fantastic. And Elmer even makes sure to put the tail down because, yeah, as far as I'm aware, we don't have skunks here in Australia, but as far as I know, yeah, they can be particularly nasty, spraying their stuff everywhere. But in any case, he pulls out a gun towards Bugs and Bugs just pushes it down. And in a subtle bit of animation, when the gun is pushed down, part of the gun even ends up hitting Elmer on the chin. It's a subtle thing, you didn't need it, but still, it works pretty well. But Bugs decides, you know what, I'm going to give you a sporting chance to shoot me. But then in another weird moment, you see Bugs doing this very strange walk towards the tree, and I'm looking at it going, yeah, it's a very awkward bit of animation. According to Devin Baxter, he believes this may be Paul Smith.
Yeah, good shot at me. Now you stand here. Okay, Doc?
Whether it is or not, you can't deny it's a very weird kind of walk. But Bugs is standing against the tree, but then he hears some birds up in the tree. And in a great bit of animation, this would have been very striking in a cinema, where Bugs says, whoa, hold it. Even though he's not breaking the fourth wall to the audience, it's just the way the shot is, but it comes across like he's saying, whoa, hold it to the audience. That would have been something to see on a very big screen at the time.
Whoa, hold it! Okay, let it go.
So he ends up walking over and gives the all okay as Alma shoots his gun. Now, does Bugs get shot? You'll find out in a moment because my good friend Eli Kopperman is going to give his thoughts on this short as we take a little bit of a break from my little breakdown. So Eli, yeah, tell us your thoughts and anything you want to say about Wild Hare.
It stinks. Nah, I'm kidding. It's a great cartoon and one of the better debut shorts for characters in the Warner Brothers lineup. Not just Bugs Bunny, but obviously this isn't Elmer Fudd's first cartoon, but you could argue it was more or less the first cartoon of the Elmer Fudd we all know and love, where he's the hunter. But as far as what the short's all about, I'll say this. It's not as briskly timed or paced as maybe some other cartoons of Tex Avery or the guys at Warner Brothers did, and it definitely has gags that were maybe done better in other shorts, but you need to understand just how culturally significant this cartoon was, not just for its time, but to this very day. Like, not only did this mark the first appearance of what we know Bugs Bunny to be, but it also marked, for the first time, a lot of notable catchphrases, some very funny gags, and also some running gags in other cartoons, whether it be Bugs trying to get someone to say, what do you mean a rabbit? Oh, you know, one of those animals with long ears, a fluffy tail, and they jump up all over. And then, of course, Bugs pretending to be dead and Elmer crying, which, if you're crying after you're deliberately going out to shoot animals, why are you even hunting to begin with, you doofus? But beyond that, like, the cartoon itself is still very funny, and I can definitely see why, as soon as Bugs said, "What's up, Doc?" for the very first time, audiences back in the day were just howling with laughter. If I could go back in time for any reason, it would be just to see that specific moment in theaters, among a lot of other things that I like to travel back in time to. Overall, it's a very, very lovely short, and it's very funny within itself. If you don't consider this a classic for any reason, you can at least acknowledge that it was the first time we ever saw the Bugs Bunny we all know and love, and that in and of itself is worth praising. That's all I gotta say, Doc.
So back to the breakdown. And speaking of breakdown, my goodness, this animation by Bob McKimson when Bugs is apparently shot. We all know he didn't get shot, okay? But imagine if you were a member of the audience seeing this for the first time, you sort of question, did he actually get shot? And of course, Alma's all excited, but we got this wonderful bit of animation where Bugs is acting like he's about to die. And this is not the last time this will actually happen. Later on, you'll see a similar sort of thing in the old grey Hare, where the older versions of these characters essentially reenact this scene here. McKimson even redoes this scene in the old grey Hare, so it's kind of interesting that he does it in this short, and then he does it again in the old grey Hare, parodying himself. But it's not even just the beautiful animation by McKimson, also the vocal deliveries by Mel Blanc, saying, oh, he's gonna die.
I'm all washed up. Oh, everything's getting dark. I can't see. Don't leave me. Getting dark. Dark. Goodbye, pal. Goodbye.
And we got the beautiful bit where Bugs is now dead. Well, not really, but in any case.
So later on in the cartoon, you hear a lot of unique musical cues from Carl Stalling in this one, and I just love listening to the score of this particular cartoon itself. There's a lot of original stuff, but something that is not original you hear later on is called Till We Meet Again, and that song has music by Richard Whiting, and the lyrics were by Raymond P. Egan, and this song is from the year 1918, and it was written during World War I, and it was actually the final year of World War I. That's when the Great War, as it was called at the time, was finishing. And the song lyrically is talking about a soldier saying goodbye to his sweetheart, and I think it's rather poignant that this is the music you hear in the scene after Elmer shoots Bugs, and Bugs does his very melodramatic goodbye. And I was rewatching the scene, and I usually pay attention to Bugs' facial reactions during the scene, but this time I was looking at what Elmer is doing facial wise, and I'm like, wow, it's really like, I mean, you could tell it's McKimson's work because of how clean and how well animated it is, but some weird looking expressions, especially in Elmer's eyes during the scene. But I mean, it's beautiful, over the top, melodramatic, and the song fits it quite nicely.
Elmer all of a sudden gets all sad because he thinks he's killed a rabbit, and this is one of my favorite traits of Elmer. He's out hunting, he's excited to hunt, but when he actually achieves his goal, or at least when he thinks he achieves his goal, he just gets all sad, depressed about it. I mean, what kind of a hunter are you?
Speak to me. I killed him. I killed him. I'm a Moidowa. I'm a wabbit killer. Why did I do it? I killed a poor little gray fuzzy wabbit.
It just kills me every single time. But Bugs, we all know he's not dead. He opens his eyes to see what's going on, letting us know that, hey, it's just a cartoon, right? So this bit of Bugs Bunny, quote-unquote, coming to is done by Rod Scribner. Elmer's continuing to cry, and in a bit that's actually done by Virgil Ross. So we had the brief bit by Rod Scribner getting up, and Virgil Ross takes his sweet, sweet time where Elmer's crying, gets Bugs to prepare his butt, basically, and does this beautiful wind-up and kicks him all the way up a tree. Beautiful.
Then, immediately after you hear Till We Meet Again, you hear the song Laugh, Clown, Laugh. Now, the music itself was written by Ted Fiorito, and the lyrics were by Joe Young and Sam Lewis. Now, this is what you hear when, I just love the way Arthur Q. Bryan does it. He starts crying. He realizes he killed the little gray wabbit. But probably my favorite line in this cartoon, besides obviously the first time Bugs says, "What's up, Doc?" and when he yells, "I am a wabbit," that line reading by Mel Blanc always kills me. But when Elmer Fudd's crying and he says, "I'm a Moidowa," Anthony, if you put a clip of it on here, I would be very happy.
I'm a Moidowa. I'm a wabbit killer. Why did I do it?
But I just love that line reading while he's crying, and obviously you could tell Bugs is playing a prank on him. That's when you hear Laugh Clown Laugh, and it sets up for the really cool scene where Bugs positions Elmer's tuchus, and he gives him a nice swift kick in the pants. So Laugh Clown Laugh was actually the theme song of the 1928 MGM film of the same name starring Lon Chaney. Now, the film itself is a silent film, but it's believed that the song Laugh Clown Laugh, which was a popular tune, was played during the screenings of the film itself. Later on that year, they did add a score to this film, but it was just mainly music and sound effects. It wasn't something like The Jazz Singer where the sound was actually synchronized into the film during the famous scene where Al Jolson is talking and stuff like that. I'm a Moidowa. I'm looking at my notes, and I wrote Moidawah, Moidowa. So I think I wrote it properly in Elmer Fudd-ese or Fuddies. Fuddish? Fuddies? Something like that.
And to top it all off, we even have a bit that I guess isn't really needed per se, but it just adds to it, where he just gives him a cigar and just does this weird ballet exit. Again, imagine being in the audience, seeing this for the first time, seeing a character like this. There really wasn't anything like this at the time. Any wonder the audiences responded so well to this and wanted more eventually. And the biggest irony is that it took not just Tex Avery, but the other directors a little bit of time to know, okay, why did Bugs Bunny work here and maybe not as much in the first few shorts they did because his character is a little bit all over the place. But in any case, the audiences responded well for sure, and you can definitely see why. So Alma is mad. He throws down his cigar, which some might even say, hey, I'm surprised it's not an exploding one. But in any case, he stomps his hat. Elmer just gets so mad, similar to his breakdown in Alma's Candid Camera. So Alma just leaves the scene without a rabbit, even though he probably would have cried if he had won anyway. But I don't know, he's such a messed up character in any case. But we go back to Bugs, animated here by Rod Scribner, where Bugs breaks the fourth wall, saying, can you imagine anyone acting like that? You know, I think the poor guy's screwy. Amen to that. He definitely is. And we end with Bugs acting all patriotic-like, using the carrot as a flute as he goes off into the hole, and we finish right there.
So the last cue we hear is at the very end of the cartoon where Bugs says, can you imagine anybody acting like that? You know, I think the poor guy's screwy. That's my best Bugs Bunny New York accent, you know. Warner Brothers hire me? No, let Eric Bowser do it. But Bugs starts turning away in a very interesting ending where he starts playing his carrot like a fife, and you start hearing snare drums out of nowhere, and he starts marching to his hole, and the song you hear itself is called The Girl I Left Behind Me. The Girl I Left Behind Me is an English song dating back to the 1700s. Some people say around the 1750s was when it got its name and it started gaining popularity. But as we know, the history of the United States, we were originally a British colony, and a lot of our traditions come from England. This song made its way over to the States, as Anthony would say, since we are both citizens of countries that trace our lineage back to the British Empire. But anywho, this song was later used by the U.S. Army as a marching tune in the 1800s. So having Bugs march back to his hole, playing it like a military fife and snare drum, it would make a whole lot of sense in this scene. Now, the last thing I want to talk about musically, it is not written in the cue sheet that I have, but it's probably in the original cue sheets that are somewhere in the archives. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know, long-term project. I'd love to do it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It is, I don't have a name for it, but I call it the stalling cue in G, in the key of G I'm referring to. Now, you're probably saying, what the heck are you talking about, Manny? G golly willikers? No. It is the music you hear when Elmer, after having his shotgun twisted, and when you see Bugs Bunny for the first time, he pops his head out of the hole, and it's the music that you hear just before he says, "What's up, Doc?" The ba 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 da ba da ba ba da.
What's up, Doc? Shh, there's a wabbit down there, and I'm trying to catch him.
This is an original stalling cue, but there's something about that cue that I just love hearing it, and you hear it in that scene. The melody's played by the violins, and then later on, when Bugs starts interrogating Elmer, he says, "What do you mean, a wabbit? With big long ears, like these, and a white widow fluffy tail like this?" And then you hear the stalling cue, but now the melody's being played by the clarinet, and it's just, I love the way that Stalling and Franklin would play around with the orchestration, passing the melody on from the violins to the clarinet. And I really like the rendition of it when it's being played by the clarinet when Bugs is interrogating Elmer.
Wabbits. With big, long ears. Oh, like these? Yeah, and a little white fluffy tail. Like this? Yup.
And you also hear the cue at the very end of the cartoon, as in the scene that I mentioned before, when Bugs is saying, I think the poor guy's screwy. Now, this particular cue, the cue in the key of G, it actually existed prior to this one. Here are some of the cartoons that use it. So it was in Snowman's Land, Alibaba Bound. I remember it's a scene with the little baby camel. You hear this cue. The Chewin' Bruin, that's another one. Of course, A Wild Hare, Holiday Highlights, Little Orphan Airedale, Mississippi Hare, Doggone South, Two's a Crowd, Cheese Chasers, Rabbit Seasoning, Kiss Me Cat, Robot Rabbit, and Whitty-O Wabbit.
First, I twack him by his footprints. Then I stop at the proper distance from the hole, raise my hand, and give the signal.
So these are all the shorts that feature this particular Carl Stalling cue. And I love how it sounds. So, going on a little bit more about the Carl Stalling cue in the key of G, I want to shout out, I believe, and man, I should have this stuff written down, but I forget. But I am going to say it's either Devin Baxter, my pal Devin, or my pal S.C. McPeter. I don't remember who it is, so you both get the credit, half credit. You get a credit and you get a credit. But one of these two gentlemen, and I know they're going to yell at me and say, "Man, it was me, you knucklehead, you schooly wabbit."
I'm a Moidowa.
But they were saying that the origin of this particular original Stalling cue comes from the work that he did while he was at the UB Iwerks studio, where he was before coming to Warner Brothers in 1936. And there is a cartoon, an UB Iwerks cartoon in particular, that has a very similar sounding cue to this one. I don't have it off the top of my head, so Devin or SC or whoever, if you know which one I'm talking about, an UB Iwerks cartoon that has something very similar to this cue in terms of the melody, please write it in the comments or let me know. But I don't have that with me right now, so yeah, have fun with that. There's a similar cue that sounds similar. Wow. Words, Manny, words. There's the cue that I'm thinking of that's used in Porky's Hired Hand and Porky's baseball broadcast. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da. It sounds very similar, but it's not the same. It's in a different key. That one's in the key of C. But yeah, this is a drag about some of the research that I've done is that I don't have as much information about the unique music that Carl Stalling and Milt Franklin, as well as, Norman Spencer, Bernard Brown, and Frank Marsalis, instead of having all the information about the cues that they use, I want to know more about the unique music that they wrote, because it is phenomenal music. And in this cartoon of Wild Hare, there are lots of other bits and pieces of unique Carl Stalling music. For example, one that I forgot is when Bugs, like this, and he starts running around in a circle and you hear ba 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 ba, and I like that little goofy music that you hear when he starts running around before Elmer starts spelling out rabbit, and I love how he spells it correctly but doesn't say it the same way. He goes wabbit.
I believe this fella is a R-A-B-B-I-T.
Okay, the wabbit. So, yeah, I love that unique cue. Thank you, Looney Tunes Songs on YouTube, for documenting every single time it was in a Warner Brothers short. I love the idea. of what you're doing. I actually had something similar in mind, but you beat me to it. So, anywho, yeah, it's great to revisit this cartoon and me ranting and raving about, Happy Rabbit. I hate that name. As well as this amazing stalling original cue in the key of G. And it's always great to see Bugs Bunny in one of his earliest forms. And just, again, I can only imagine how audiences reacted. Obviously, they reacted very positively to the Bugs and Elmer dynamic. And that's why, these two characters are still strong 85 years later. And this is still a great cartoon. Arguably one of Tex Avery's best and one of the best that the studio ever made. And it's always good to revisit. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to my edition of Manny's Music Time. Thanks for supporting my work. Thanks for supporting Anthony's work. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the commentary with Anthony and friends. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Follow me on social media at the Toony Tenor, TheToonyTenor, for more updates about my life as a musician and as a multifaceted geek. So you'll see some music, you'll see some Looney Tunes, some Ninja Turtles, whatever. Follow and you'll find out. Have a great day, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. And so long, Doc. Actually, no, I got to say, I think I'm a pretty screwy guy. Or I don't know. Just this ending, I can't think of an ending for this one. Maybe I should get out. I have a keyboard near me. Maybe I should play The Girl I Left Behind on the keyboard. But I need to practice. All right. Bye.
Wow. Look, I'll get my rating out of the way, okay? This is still 10 out of 10. Even if, as I said before, even if this character did not take off, this will still be considered one of Tex Avery's finest cartoons because of the way it's done. Sure, over at MGM, as a director, Tex Avery would refine his timing even further, somewhat to an obsessive degree, even by the frame from a lot of accounts. But that doesn't change the fact that this is not only a classic, it is still an absolutely hilarious cartoon. So Avery would only do a few more Bugs Bunny shorts, all of which are great, although one unfortunately has a heavy area of racism to it, but even that has some bits in it that showed off some amazing work. It's just rather unfortunate that the main character is what he is. But those shorts also show that Avery made this short, audiences responded to it tremendously. Avery didn't set out to make a new star character, he just made this short, and that was it. And the thinking at the time would have been, hey, I got this funny idea, let's do it. He makes it, and then the audience responds and they want more. So Avery makes more. Then Chuck Jones makes more. Friz Freleng then makes more. But not Clampett at first, because remember, Bugs Bunny actually did not star in any black and white cartoons at all. He debuted here in a color Merry Melody short, and he would stay that way. He did have a cameo in Porky Pig's Feet, but I don't really count that. In terms of a proper starring cartoon, it was always color for the rabbit. So later on, you would have the All Grey Hair, which I already mentioned. So Bob Clamper would, in a sense, parody this short somewhat, where he would have both old and young versions of Bugs and Elmer doing essentially the same things as this short. And later on, Chuck Jones, and he's someone who admired Tex Avery greatly, would end up doing the Hunting Trilogy, which are more or less remakes of this particular short, and he does it 3 times there. But of course, he does it with his own sensibilities, and he adds Daffy to the mix, so at least they're different, but there's no denying that it was definitely a quote-unquote remake of sorts of a Wild Hare, and it all comes from here. So that will do it for this review. I know it was a long one, but hey, we had to do it for this particular short, given how important it is. So thanks to all my guests on this review, and thank you all for watching. So until next time, take care.
Can you imagine anybody acting like that? You know, I think the poor guy's screwy.